This is the story of the Sith, not as cackling villains in black cloaks, but as an ancient tradition, a long, unbroken line of beings who chose the dark side and never looked back in the Star Wars mythos. The Sith are the answer to a single forbidden question. What if fear is not rejected? What if desire is not restrained? What if the Force is bent not toward balance but toward absolute power? The Jedi speak of peace, of harmony, of an order that protects the innocent and resists attachment. The Sith emerge wherever that vision fails, wherever someone looks at the same galaxy, the same wars, the same fragile republics and empires, and decides that mercy is weakness, that control is safety, that domination is the only lasting peace for millennia to come. That decision will echo through temples, battlefields, and ruined worlds. Tonight, the Sith are not a jump scare or a shouted revelation. They are a low, unbroken hum beneath galactic history, a background presence that rises and falls like distant thunder. This journey will move slowly through that darkness, from nameless cults that first whispered to the dark side, to the red-skinned Sith species on Korriban and Zeost, whose very bloodlines were bound to shadow and flame. It will drift past the early dark Jedi exiles, cast out after the 100-year darkness, who vanished into unknown space and found a forgotten world. What they found there would change everything. An isolated people steeped in the dark side, waiting to be conquered, guided and corrupted. From that union came the first Sith Empire and the title Dark Lord that would linger like a curse. The path ahead stretches across lost golden ages and sudden wars across spirits, trapped in tombs and empires hiding between the stars. It will trace the rise of lords like Marka Ragnos and Naga Sado, the great hyperspace war, the fall and supposed extinction of the Sith, and the quiet survival of their teachings in secret orders and forbidden holocrons. For now, there is no need to remember every name, every planet, every date. Let the details pass like distant stars seen from a slow-moving ship. What matters is the feeling of time itself, expanding the sense of an ancient night that never truly ends. Breathe slowly. Let each era become a gentle wave of conflict and consequence, passing softly overhead. By the end of this long descent, the timeline will carry the Sith from their murky beginnings to emperors in hiding, to the fall of the Jedi, and finally to the last sparks of the Bane line at Endor and beyond, until only echoes remain in the dark. Before the Sith, the Jedi, the Force, and the seeds of division. Before the Sith, there was only the mystery of the Force and those who tried to listen to it across the quiet ages of the early Republic. Scattered mystics and wanderers began to sense that invisible energy field that bound the galactic tapestry. Together, they felt currents of calm and flashes of fury, visions of futures that never came to pass, and echoes of ancient pain from these scattered seekers. The first Jedi traditions slowly emerged. Not yet an order, not yet a temple on Coruscant, but small enclaves on distant worlds like Tython and Ossus. There they meditated on the light of the stars, learned to move stones with thought and heal wounds. With a touch, they spoke of balance without truly naming light or dark. They only knew that the Force could soothe or burn, depending on the heart that called upon it. Over tens of thousands of years, this loose fellowship hardened into the Jedi Order, a more formal brotherhood of guardians and scholars. They crafted codes to restrain. Emotion built archives to catalogue their visions and raised towering spires from which to watch over the Republic. What followed was a slow turning of instinct into doctrine, the story of an order trying to tame an ocean with rules and oaths. Yet even in those first halls, disagreement whispered at the edges. Some Jedi felt the Force as pure serenity, a current that demanded selflessness and detachment. Others sensed in it a wild storm of passion that answered most strongly when called upon with conviction, anger, love, and fear to them. The Force was not gentle at all. It was power waiting to be claimed. These differences were not yet open conflict. They were quiet divergences in meditation circles and training yards. One master urged calm, another demanded intensity. One spoke of surrendering to the will of the Force, another of bending it to purpose. Over time, those who favored harmony emphasized compassion and restraint. Those drawn to passion experimented with pushing their limits, testing how far the dark side could be approached without falling for thousands of years. This tension remained contained, but it never disappeared. The Sith were not born as an invading empire from beyond known space. They began as a shadow cast by the Jedi, themselves a philosophical fracture within the same tradition. Every strict code created its own rebels. Every warning about forbidden knowledge made that knowledge more alluring for some ambitious Jedi. The dark side promised clarity in war and certainty in judgment in secret chambers. They studied more aggressive techniques, the ability to shatter minds, to conjure lightning from empty air, to twist life itself. What they found there would change everything. It convinced them that the Jedi Council's restraint was weakness, not wisdom. This slow divergence would shape the future of the galaxy for millennia to come. Quiet debates would harden into factions, factions into heresies, and heresies into open rebellion. In time, those private experiments and unspoken resentments would ignite into the 100-year darkness, a brutal conflict that would birth the first Dark Jedi exiles and carry the timeline toward a world called Korriban and a name that would one day terrify the galaxy Sith. The 100-year darkness, when Jedi turned against the light. Around 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi Order faced the moment its quiet doubts finally burned into open flame. This was the era when the line between light and dark stopped being a theory and became a battlefield. The story of the 100-year darkness began as a disagreement and ended as a wound in galactic history that would never fully heal. At first, it was only a faction, a circle of ambitious Jedi who believed the Force was being restrained. They wanted more. They craved knowledge. The Council had forbidden. They hungered for power that the light side would not offer. They studied ancient rites, experimented with emotions. The Order taught them to fear and reached into the dark side, not as a temptation, but as a tool they believed they could master. What followed was a slow unraveling. These proto-dark Jedi turned to forbidden alchemy, reshaping flesh and life itself. They bred monstrous war beasts, leviathans that could feed on Force energy, and twisted creatures designed for siege and terror worlds that had known only peace under the Republic. Suddenly faced abominations grown in secret laboratories. Each new horror made the next one easier to justify. Around them, the conflict lengthened into a grinding century of war. This was not a single glorious clash, but a long exhaustion campaigns that blurred together, sieges that lasted years, skirmishes fought on nameless moons, where only the Force remembered the dead Jedi who held to the light, saw their compassion worn down by constant loss. Dark Jedi, who had once spoken of enlightenment, now spoke only of victory and survival. The 100-year darkness was as much a spiritual collapse as a military one. Among the fallen were figures whose names would shape the future, even if later chronicles disagreed on every detail. Some tell of Ajunta Pal, a charismatic visionary, who argued that the Force itself demanded dominance, that those strong in the Force had the right to rule over life and death. Others whisper of warlords who wore living armor forged from their own creations, who strode across battlefields, surrounded by beasts that screamed in the Force. Whatever the exact roster, their pattern was the same: insight curdled into arrogance and arrogance into tyranny. Despite the horror they inflicted, the Dark Jedi ultimately lost their war. The final campaigns pushed them back, system by system, until their strongholds collapsed under combined Jedi and Republic assault on worlds like Korbos. The rebellion shattered, but in a decision that many on both sides would question, the victors chose exile over execution. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history. The defeated Dark Jedi were cast into the unknown regions, their ships sent beyond mapped space, stripped of support and left to vanish. Cast out and burning with hatred, they drifted into the dark, their walls seemingly over their order broken. Yet the unknown regions were not empty, and what they found there would change everything for millennia to come. Exiles and Red Worlds, meeting the Sith species on Korriban, cast out and burning with hatred, they drifted into the dark, their shattered fleets pushed ever deeper by blind jumps and failing systems until the stars themselves seemed to thin. Then a red world appeared, Korriban. It hung in space like an open wound, its surface veined with canyons and jagged mountain ranges, its thin atmosphere stained in hues of rust and blood under those red skies. Sandstorms crawled over desolate valleys and colossal cliffs, cut the horizon into cruel angles. It was ominous, yet strangely still, a quiet graveyard at the edge of galactic history. Scattered across that world lay tombs carved straight into the rock vast. Necropolises of stone pyramids and cyclopean halls, their entrances framed by towering statues with inhuman features. The wind howled through broken colonnades, carrying the faint echo of ancient chants. This was not an empty planet. It was a mausoleum for a forgotten civilization, and what they found there would change everything. The inhabitants of Korriban were the original Sith, a red-skinned species with bony facial ridges and burning yellow eyes. They were primitive by galactic standards, yet steeped in ritual and ceremony. Their culture revolved around death lineage and the unseen currents of the Force. They did not divide the Force into light and dark. They simply felt its pull. Most were naturally attuned to the dark side, their passions and emotions feeding it in elaborate blood rites and coronation rituals. Into this world, the exiled Dark Jedi descended as conquerors, armed with advanced technology, starships, and refined Force techniques. They appeared to the native Sith as living gods, and what followed was domination. The Dark Jedi crushed resistance with telekinetic storms and blades of crackling energy. They toppled local chieftains and priest kings, then raised their own banners over the tomb worlds. Yet conquest alone could not sustain an empire. Over time, the conquerors began to rule rather than simply ravage. They took Sith servants and advisors. They learned the local tongue and adapted its harsh syllables into their own teachings. In turn, the native priests studied the exiles' dark side disciplines, merging them with older rites and burial magic. The story of this age was not just war, it was fusion. Generations passed, bloodlines mixed, children were born, carrying both human and pure-blood Sith heritage. Their languages blended, their symbols intertwined. The pyramidal tombs of old Korriban were reshaped into dark temples for a new order. The title, Dark Lord of the Sith, emerged, binding foreign warlords to ancient tradition. This hybrid society would shape every future Sith empire. From this point in history, the word Sith changed forever. It no longer meant only the red-skinned natives of Korriban. It now named an order, a dark force wielding tradition, devoted to power, conflict and dominion for thousands of years. That identity would spread from Korriban to other red worlds like Zeost and beyond, forming the backbone of the first true Sith Empire, whose rise and golden age still lay ahead. In the shadow of those tombs, the galaxy's oldest lasting Dark Order quietly took form, forging an empire of shadows. Zeost, Korriban, and the first Dark Lords. In the shadow of those tombs, the galaxy's oldest lasting Dark Order quietly took form, and from that silence, an empire began to crystallize. A theocracy of the dark side ruled not by councils or senates, but by will, by fear, and by sorcery. The story of the first Sith Empire is the story of power raised to the level of religion and then weaponized against an entire people. This early empire functioned as a rigid, authoritarian order. At its peak stood a single Dark Lord of the Sith beneath him, ranked lesser Sith Lords and High Priests, each governing territories, legions and cults. They blended arcane rituals with brutal politics. Executions could be public sacrifices. Decrees could be framed as prophecies. Obedience was not only required, it was preached as a sacred duty. To the dark side, Korriban remained the spiritual heart of this empire. Its blood-red canyons carved into necropolises, the cliffs hollowed out into colossal tombs, where the earliest Dark Lords were entombed with weapons, holocrons and bound spirits. The air itself seemed heavy with the Force. As if the planet remembered every act of cruelty, every whispered oath sworn in the dark, those who walked its valleys did so under the gaze of statues that had watched for thousands of years. Zeost, by contrast, was cold and restrained, a frozen world of black stone citadels and sprawling fortresses, where the Empire's true administration unfolded from. Ziost fleets were ordered campaigns, planned slaves counted and broken. What followed was a quiet machinery of oppression, the spiritual frenzy of Korriban feeding, the calculated control of Ziost. Together, the twin worlds would shape Sith identity for millennia to come. Within this structure, the Dark Lords began to codify their philosophy. They taught that passion was strength, that strength led to power, and that power granted the right to rule. Conflict was not a failure of the system. It was the system. Rivalry between Sith Lords was encouraged as a test of worth, yet rebellion against the reigning Dark Lord meant annihilation. This balance of constant pressure and absolute dominance created a culture where mercy was weakness and ambition was survival. Over time, names emerged from the early darkness, half history, half legend. Ajunta Pol, the first among the exiled Dark Jedi to claim the mantle of Dark Lord. His tomb on Korriban would later become a place of pilgrimage and peril. Calig Tulak Horde and others followed, each adding new layers of cruelty and knowledge to the growing empire. Their legacies lingered as spirits and inscriptions promising power to any who dared disturb their rest above them all. In later centuries rose a towering figure. Marka Ragnos. Under his long reign, the empire stabilized and prospered, its borders secure, its internal conflicts carefully managed. Yet even in that apparent stability, the seeds of future war were present, because the moment a ruler like Ragnos fell, ambitious rivals would be waiting, and his death would open the way for a struggle that would drag the hidden Sith Empire into the wider galactic stage. The funeral of Marka Ragnos, a silent procession under red skies. His end came beneath the red skies of Korriban. On that ancient world, the Sith gathered in silence to lay their Dark Lord to rest. The Valley of the Dark Lords glowed with a dull crimson light as the sun bled through dust-heavy clouds. Torches flickered along the carved stone. Paths, their flames small and uncertain against the vastness of the tombs, yet the procession moved slowly, steadily, as if the entire empire was holding its breath. Marka Ragnos had ruled longer than any could clearly remember. His reign stretched across centuries of Sith history, a time when the empire was feared but stable, when war was directed outward in careful, measured campaigns instead of inward in chaos. He was a Dark Lord who understood that power without control would shatter even the strongest empire under his watch. The rivalries of the Sith were contained, managed, turned into a constant pressure that honed strength rather than destroyed it. Now that pressure had no outlet, robed figures walked in two endless lines, their faces hidden, their steps echoing softly on the stone. The only sounds were the low chant of ancient Sith tongues and the distant rumble of storms rolling across the barren horizon. Each note of the chant rose and fell with hypnotic precision, like the breathing of some vast, sleeping beast. For thousands of years, these halls had heard similar rituals, and for millennia to come, they would remember this one. At the heart of the procession floated the sarcophagus of Marka Ragnos, a massive stone vessel etched with jagged glyphs that whispered of conquest and fear. When it finally reached the mouth of his tomb, heavy mechanisms ground into motion. The scrape of stone against stone dragged slowly through the air as the lid began to open. Cold air spilled from within, carrying the scent of dust metal and something older, something that felt like the dark side. Made tangible among the assembled lords, two figures watched more closely than most. Naga Sado and Ludo Kresh, both powerful, both ambitious, both certain that the story of the Sith Empire would shape itself around their next move. They stood only a few steps apart, yet an entire future war stretched between them. Sado's eyes followed every ritual gesture, calculating how fear and tradition might be turned into opportunity. Kresh watched the same scene, searching for signs of weakness in those who might oppose a more cautious rule. Ragnos's lifeless form was lowered into the sarcophagus. The chanting deepened, The torches dimmed, as if the Force itself was receding with him when the lid slid shut. The final impact echoed down the corridors like a distant thunderclap. What followed was not peace, but a silence heavy with unspoken intent. Every Sith in that hall understood that a power vacuum had opened and that the old order was gone outside the tomb. The storms intensified. Lightning crawled across the sky, illuminating the valley in stark white flashes. In that harsh light, the assembled lords looked less like mourners and more like predators, waiting for the first sign of weakness beyond Korriban's atmosphere. The wider galaxy spun on unaware. The Republic believed the Sith nothing more than rumor-distant and irrelevant, that illusion would not last. Naga Sado in particular was already turning, his gaze outward toward that unsuspecting galactic order, and what he would soon discover at the edge of Sith space would change everything. Naga Sado's gamble. The great hyperspace war begins. What Naga Sado discovered was not a secret weapon or a forgotten tomb, but something far more dangerous to the old Sith Empire's isolation. Two lost hyperspace explorers from the Galactic Republic, Gavin and Jory Darrigan, stumbling blind through uncharted routes, had dropped out of hyperspace into the heart of Sith space. What they found there would change everything for generations. The Sith had looked inward, obsessed with ritual, with tombs, with the slow accumulation of dark power. Naga Sado was different. He was a visionary and reckless Sith Lord who believed that stagnation was death. He studied forbidden lore, dreamed of conquest, and burned to prove his supremacy over rivals like the cautious traditionalist Ludo Kresh. To Sado, the Republic was not a threat, it was an opportunity. The arrival of the Darrigans gave him the pretext he needed. Others argued for execution and secrecy, but Sado argued for war. He claimed that the Republic's presence meant invasion was inevitable, that only a preemptive strike could preserve the Empire's power. This was the story of an ambitious lord turning an accident into a casus belli. When the council hesitated, Sado turned to manipulation. What followed was a carefully staged descent into manufactured crisis. He arranged an attack on the prison where the Darrigans were held, made it appear as if Republic agents had struck deep into Scythe territory. He used elaborate Force illusions to project phantom fleets and assassins, framing his political enemies and feeding the fear he himself had sown. Ludo Kresh accused him of treachery, but in the chaos, Sado appeared as the only leader with a plan. He secured control of the Empire's war machine, moved his base to a hidden fortress on the red moon of Korriban's system, and began preparing a Neith armada. His meditation spheres and battle meditation amplified the dark side across entire fleets, turning ordinary Scythe officers into instruments of his will around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The great hyperspace war erupted. Sith fleets burst from secret routes into core worlds and key trade lanes. Worlds that had known only distant legends of the Sith suddenly faced crimson warships and dark lords leading massed assaults. The Republic reeled. The Jedi scrambled to respond, dispatching knights to hold worlds that had never expected to see war for all its scale. The conflict was brief and burning rather than long and grinding. Sado struck hard at Coruscant and other hubs, hoping to decapitate the Galactic Order in a single campaign. Yet his illusions could not hold forever. Jedi strike teams pierced his deceptions. The Republic Navy adapted, and Ludo Kresh launched a civil counterattack against him. At the worst possible moment, Sado's fleets faltered his grand design, collapsed under the weight of internal Sith rivalry. He retreated into deep space, fleeing to the jungle moon. Yavin 4. While the Republic and Jedi hunted down the shattered remains of the old Sith Empire worlds, were glassed fleets. Annihilated archives burned for thousands of years. The galaxy would believe the Sith destroyed, yet Sado's survival, his buried temples and lingering spirit, would shape the next great fall of the Sith that waited in the shadows to be awakened, collapse, and exile. Again, the Sith Empire's first great fall collapse. For the Sith did not come as a single moment. It came as a slow unraveling of power and belief under the cold light of defeat around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Republic and the Jedi Order pushed into Sith space, determined not merely to repel an invasion, but to erase an empire. What followed was a methodical campaign of destruction. Fleets burned their way through the old Sith hyperlanes worlds like Korriban and Zyos were, bombarded star temples, shattered palaces, cracked open by turbo-laser fire. Ancient archives that had endured for thousands of years went up in silent flame in orbit. Sith warships were hunted down and cornered. Their commanders offered no quarter and received none on the surface. Jedi strike teams moved through ruined cities and burial valleys, cutting down Sith warlords and dark priests. The Republic Senate, fearful of another great hyperspace war, endorsed harsh measures. Entire lineages of Sith nobility vanished in a generation. The visible empire, the proud order that had once rivaled the Republic, simply dissolved under the weight of total war. Yet external pressure alone did not end. The Sith Empire, the story of its first great fall, is also a story of betrayal. As defeat loomed, rival lords turned on each other. Some tried to bargain with Republican commanders, offering secret routes and codes in exchange for amnesty. Others sabotaged one another's fleets, hoping to be the last survivor of a dying regime in a society built on conflict and suspicion. The dark side turned inward on Korriban rival claimants to the title of Dark Lord, slaughtered each other in the shadow of the tombs on other worlds. Governors abandoned their posts, fleeing with personal treasures, while their subjects burned. This final wave of treachery shattered any chance of coordinated resistance. The Empire did not simply lose it, devoured itself far from these collapsing front lines. Naga Sado enacted his own escape. The defeated Dark Lord fled to the jungle moon, Yavin 4, taking loyal Massassi followers and plundered artifacts there. In the dense red forests, he raised titanic stone temples fueled by Sith sorcery. Then he did something unusual for a Sith Lord. He chose sleep, entombing himself in a great pyramid. Cedo entered suspended animation, a self-made relic, a sleeping wound in the Force. His chambers were filled with holocrons, alchemical notes, and weapons designed for wars that no longer existed for millennia. To come, his temple would brood in silence, while vines and moss swallowed its sharp edges across former Sith space. Similar remnants endured shattered holocrons, half buried in desert sands, encrypted archives in forgotten strongholds, small enclaves of surviving adepts who went to ground rather than face Jedi justice to the Republic. It appeared the Sith were gone, but the dark side remembered in time seekers of forbidden power would come to these places. Exar Kun on Yavin 4, Freedon Nad on Onderon, countless lesser cults on nameless worlds. What they found there would change everything, proving that while empires fall, the Sith rarely vanish. They only wait for the next hand willing to claim their legacy. Echoes of Ragnos, Exar Kun, and the return of ancient Sith spirits. And when that next hand finally reached out, it belonged to a Jedi around 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The galaxy exhaled. The Republic had recovered from the Great Hyperspace War. The visible Sith Empire lay in ruins, and the Jedi Order believed the dark threat had mostly ended. Yet in the quiet that followed, ambition began to grow again. This time from within the very Guardians who had once defeated the darkness. Exar Kun was one of the Order's brightest lights, a prodigy of the Force, disciplined, skilled, admired, but brilliance can become a doorway. He grew restless with accepted teachings. He wanted more. He craved knowledge the Council had forbidden. He hungered for power that the light side could never provide. What followed was a slow, quiet drift into fascination with the dark in the archives. Kun found traces of worlds the Jedi preferred to forget. Korriban Yavin 4 names whispered in old reports of Sith warlords and cursed temples to him. They were not warnings. They were invitations. The story of Exar Kun is the story of a Jedi who treated ancient Sith history as a challenge rather than a lesson. And the Force answered that curiosity with echoes from the grave. He went first to Korriban, the burial world of the old empire there. The sands still hid the tombs of Dark Lords, the air heavy with lingering hatred among those silent monuments. The ghost of Marka Ragnos appeared, the same spirit that once judged Naga. Sado and Ludo Kresh now studied this living Jedi with cold interest. Ragnos sensed potential, and he did what the Sith had done for thousands of years. He offered direction without mercy. Ragnos' spirit did not simply tempt Kun with raw power. It framed the past as unfinished business. The Scythe had fallen. The Republic still stood. The Jedi still claimed moral authority. The war was not over. Merely paused. Kun left. Korriban convinced that he was chosen to continue a legacy, one that would shape the next great galactic conflict. His path led then to Yavin 4, where Naga Sadow had once fled after the great hyperspace war there, in overgrown temples and sprawling pyramids. Kun found Sadow's experiments, alchemical chambers, twisted war beasts and vaults of forbidden lore. What they found there would change everything for Exar Kun. The moon was a university of the dark side, and its faculty were dead. On Yavin 4, ancient spirits closed in. They broke his body to break his resistance. They offered survival in exchange for surrender, and he accepted the bargain. The rituals that followed burned away, the last restraints of the Jedi Order. Exar Kun emerged wielding a new double-bladed lightsaber and a new title, Dark Lord of the Sith. Proof that even in death the Sith could still recruit. The old empire was gone, yet its ghosts had chosen a successor, and as Exar Kun prepared to spread their teachings across the Republic, another fallen hero was already walking a parallel path toward the same abyss. The Great Sith War, Jedi, Mandalorians, and a galaxy in flames. Exar Kun did not simply declare himself Dark Lord of the Sith and wait for followers to appear. He went hunting for them across the Republic. He sought out ambitious Jedi Knights and disillusioned Padawans, those who questioned the Council, those who already felt the pull of the dark side on worlds like Ossus and Coruscant. He offered what the Jedi would not forbidden knowledge, ancient Sith sorcery, and the promise of unrestricted power. What followed was a new kind of Sith movement, one that fused the rituals of the old empire with the technologies of the late Republic. Kun studied holocrons from Naga Sadow and Freeden Nad, then applied those lessons to mass-produced war machines, fleets, and superweapons. This was not the distant theocratic empire of Korriban. It was a shadow network embedded inside the very galactic order that believed the Sith extinct. At the same time, another tragedy unfolded, the story of Ulic Qel-Droma, a celebrated Jedi hero sent to infiltrate the Kraith cult that had risen from Onderon's Sith legacy Ulic, intended to destroy them from within. Instead, their poisons, their dark side rituals, and their seductive vision of control slowly corroded him when Exar Kun confronted Ulic in a ritual duel. The dark side itself intervened, recognizing them both and binding their fates. Kun became Dark Lord Ulic, his unwilling warlord from that alliance. The Great Sith War erupted. It was not a simple clash of Jedi and Sith. It drew in Mandalorian clans hired as shock troops, Krath fleets ruling from the Empress Teta system, and frightened Republic worlds forced to choose sides. The conflict spread like a stain across the core and the outer rim. Jedi outposts fell. Republic shipyards burned whole sectors, became testing grounds for Sith superweapons. The assault on Ossus marked the turning point. Ossus was the heart of Jedi, learning a world of libraries and ancient artifacts. When Kun and Ulic struck, they did not only aim to win a battle, they meant to erase Jedi history. They unleashed solar detonations that nearly consumed the planet in fire. Jedi Masters died to protect holocrons. Apprentices felt a fear and rage, and for a moment the Order's moral authority seemed ready to collapse under its own doubt. Yet the dark side overreached Ulic. Remorseful after killing his own brother under Kun's influence, finally broke. He surrendered to the Jedi and revealed Kun's plans. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, because Ulic's confession allowed the Order to unite in one desperate counterstroke. They could not reach Kun by fleets or armies, so they attacked him through the Force itself, on Yavin 4 in temples once ruled by Naga Sadow. Exar Kun performed his final ritual as Jedi Masters encircled the moon and unleashed a combined wall of light. Kun's body was destroyed, but his spirit survived, bound to the jungle stones. Another Sith Lord dead, yet not gone. His whispers would remain for millennia to come, a pattern now clear. Sith rising from forgotten knowledge, waging devastating war, then falling in ruin, while their teachings lingered, waiting for the next restless mind to listen. from war to crusade, Revan, Malak, and the Mandalorian catalyst, but the echoes of Exar. Kun's fall did not fade into silence. They seeped forward through history into a new age of crisis and war. Around 3 centuries after the Great Sith War, the galaxy faced another test. This time, not from ghosts or hidden cults, but from armored warriors who believed conflict itself was purity. The Mandalorians had always lived for battle. Yet in this era, they became something darker under the Mandalore. The ultimate, they launched brutal campaigns along the galactic rim, burning worlds, enslaving populations and testing their strength against the Republic. The Outer Rim bled first. Remote colonies, shattered fleets, vanished. Entire sectors fell quiet. The Republic pleaded for help from the Jedi Order, but the Council hesitated. Memories of Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun were still raw. The story of fallen heroes who had rushed into war and emerged as Sith was a warning carved into living memory. The Council feared that open involvement would feed the dark side and ignite a new Sith empire. So they chose restraint meditation, aid missions, limited intervention on the front lines. That restraint looked like abandonment. Refugee ships overcrowded with the wounded drifted toward core worlds. Reports of massacres spread through the Holonet. Jedi Knights stationed near the border watched systems burn while being ordered to stand down in that pressure. A new kind of leader emerged, a brilliant, charismatic Jedi named Revan. Revan studied history and saw a pattern of hesitation leading to catastrophe. He argued that the Jedi were guardians of the galaxy, not distant philosophers, when the Council refused to authorize a full response. He and his closest ally Alec, later known as Malak, broke with their masters. They called for volunteers, and what followed was a Jedi-led crusade, independent of the Order, yet still sworn to defend the Republic. Thousands of younger Jedi answered Revan's call, drawn by his certainty and by the simple clarity of stopping Mandalorian atrocities. They became generals, admirals, and special operatives. Revan's strategies were ruthless, precise, and terrifyingly effective. Worlds that had been losing for years suddenly pushed the Mandalorians back. The crusade would shape the balance of power across the entire Outer Rim. But war leaves marks even on the most disciplined mind. Revan began to favor decisive strikes over diplomacy, orbital bombardments over prolonged sieges, targeted assassinations over negotiation. Each victory demanded a greater price in compassion. Each atrocity justified harsher measures in response. Slowly, the line between necessary action and dark side indulgence blurred in seeking to protect the galaxy. Revan walked the same path that had consumed the Dark Jedi, and Exar Kun, he delved into forbidden tactics, studied ancient battle meditation, and listened to whispers in the Force that promised quicker ends to the war. When the final confrontation with Mandalore the Ultimate revealed hints of a greater power lurking beyond known space, Revan followed that trail into the unknown regions. What they found there would change everything, and the true age of Revan as Sith Lord was about to begin. Revan's fall, discovering a hidden Sith empire in the dark. Revan's pursuit into the unknown regions began as a mission to end future wars before they could begin. It was driven by a belief that if the source of the Mandalorian's strange confidence could be cut out at the root, the Republic might finally know peace. Instead, that journey led straight into the heart of a hidden Sith domain that had been waiting in the dark for thousands of years, far beyond the mapped hyperlanes, beyond the borders of any galactic chart. Revan and Malak followed faint signals and distorted currents in the Force. The trail led them to Dromund Chaos, a storm-racked world heavy with dark side energy. There they discovered an empire that should not have existed, an imperial order that claimed direct descent from the ancient lords of Korriban and Zeostward. They found they would change everything. At its center ruled a being who had survived every earlier collapse of Sith power. The emperor known as Vitiate, born as Tenebrae in the old Sith Empire. He had endured the great hyperspace war, consumed entire worlds through a ritual of annihilation and withdrawn into secrecy. While the galaxy believed the Sith extinct, he rebuilt in the shadows for millennia to come. He cultivated a hidden empire of fanatical Sith, loyal only to him. When Revan and Malak arrived, Vitiate recognized opportunity. The story of their defiance against the Jedi Council and their brilliance in war convinced him they could be weapons as much as threats. He invited them into an audience within his citadel, cloaked in ritual and illusion. There he reached into their minds using the dark side with a precision that few in history could match. What followed was not a simple conversion, but a breaking under his influence. Their will was bent, their memories and motivations twisted. Revan and Malak were remade as Sith Lords, not as equals, but as instruments. Their task was clear. They would return to known space, weaken the Republic, shatter the Jedi Order, and prepare the galaxy for the Emperor's eventual conquest. Even their search for the Starforge, an ancient Rakatan factory of war, was nudged by his design. Revan emerged from the unknown regions, transformed, masked, armored, and commanding fleets under a new Sith banner. He launched the Jedi Civil War with ruthless efficiency, striking shipyards, worlds, and trade routes with a strategist's precision. The Republic staggered under assaults, guided by a mind that had once sworn to defend it. Malak, at his side, enforced this new order with brutal directness, taking worlds by bombardment when subtlety failed. The tragic irony lay at the core of Revan's fall. A Jedi who had gone to war to protect the galaxy from future threats had become one of its greatest dangers, all while serving an ancient master. He barely remembered the hidden. A will of Vitiate moved behind every victory and every atrocity. And as the conflict deepened, other Sith began to watch Revan's rise with interest and quiet fear, wondering what shadow truly ruled the war. The Jedi Civil War. Revan, Malak, and the shattering of trust. Revan's rise as a Sith Lord created a new kind of war, one driven not only by fleets and armies, but by a brilliant, wounded mind convinced that only ruthless control could save the galaxy. What followed was the systematic unmaking of the Republic's defenses, as Revan and his apprentice Malak drove from victory to victory under a banner that still claimed to protect the galaxy from future threats. At the heart of their new power stood the Starforge, an ancient factory station discovered in the ruins of the Rakatan Empire, hanging above a dying star. It drew on both stellar energy and the dark side of the Force to churn out warships, droids, and weapons without end. With this engine of conquest, Revan and Malak struck at key Republic worlds. Taris, Dantooine, and countless lesser systems felt the weight of orbital bombardment and occupation. The Jedi Order struggled to respond. Their knights were divided between those who had followed Revan into the Mandalorian Wars and those who had obeyed the Council's warnings against attachment to conflict. Whole sectors slipped into Sith control as more Jedi fell, defected, or disappeared into the shadows of the new Empire. The war would shape the reputation of the Jedi for millennia to come as protectors who had failed to foresee the darkness growing in their own ranks. But the alliance between the two Dark Lords was fragile. Malak hungered for power without restraint, resenting the strategic patience that still guided his master's plans. The breaking point came when the Republic and the Jedi launched a desperate strike on Revan's flagship in the middle of a pitched battle. Malak turned his guns on his own commander, firing on the bridge to kill Revan and seize command for himself. Revan survived. Barely Jedi strike teams boarded the shattered vessel and found the unconscious Sith Lord. What they found there would change everything rather than execute their greatest enemy. The Jedi Council chose a different path. They erased Revan's memories, reshaped his identity, and presented him to the galaxy as an ordinary man, given a second chance. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history in ways none of them fully understood, as Revan traveled the galaxy again, guided by Jedi Watchers and chance companions. Fragments of the past began to surface. Visions, echoes, familiar worlds that stirred an unease. He could not name his slow rediscovery of his former life, mirrored the story of the Sith themselves, a long, dark legacy, pieced together from ruins, whispers, and half-remembered crimes. When the truth emerged, Revan faced a choice. Remain the weapon Malak had tried to discard, or turn against the Sith Empire he had helped create. He chose resistance, reclaiming his strength without surrendering again to the dark side. Leading a final campaign against Malak, Revan boarded the Starforge itself, and destroyed the ancient station, ending the Jedi Civil War and shattering his former apprentices' rule. Yet even in victory, the deeper shadow remained unseen. The hidden Sith Emperor, Vitiate, and his vast, secret empire still waited beyond known space, patient, silent, and preparing a far greater conflict that would haunt the galaxy for thousands of years. The Sith Triumvirate, Nihilus, Sion, and the wound in the Force. Yet even in the wake of Revan's victory, another darkness was already taking shape in the ruins of the Jedi Civil War, a new expression of Sith power that was less an empire and more a wound, a fracture in the very fabric of the Force itself. This was the Sith Triumvirate, three lords bound not by loyalty, but by shared ruin. Darth Nihilus, Darth Sions, and Darth Traya. They did not build fleets or proclaim a grand galactic empire. Instead, they hunted silence. They sought an empty galaxy where the Force itself would fall quiet. Darth Nihilus was the most literal manifestation of that hunger. Once a man, he had been transformed by the cataclysm at Malachor V into something almost beyond description. A void in humanoid form, his body withered, his voice a distant echo. He no longer craved wealth or territory. He devoured life itself, entire worlds drained of Force energy, until nothing remained but ash and memory. If Nihilus was hunger, then Darth Sion was pain. The story of his existence was a study in refusal to die, shattered again and again in war. His flesh cracked, his bones broken. He held his body together through sheer rage and agony. Every heartbeat was an act of will, every step a rejection of death. He was a walking corpse animated by the dark side, a reminder that the Sith would cling to power, even when their bodies had already failed. Presiding over them was Darth Traya, once Kreia, a Jedi historian and mentor to Revan. Her fall was quieter, more philosophical. Betrayed by both Jedi and Sith, she came to believe that the Force itself was a cruel manipulator, guiding destinies toward endless conflict. What followed was a heresy, deeper than simple rebellion. She did not merely hate the Jedi Order, she sought revenge upon the Force itself. The crucible that forged them lay at Malachor V. During the final stages of the Mandalorian Wars, Revan had deployed a superweapon, the Mass Shadow Generator. Its activation tore the planet's crust apart and twisted gravity into a labyrinth of broken stone. In that instant, so many lives were extinguished at once that the Force screamed what they found. They would change everything. The battlefield became a wound in the Force, a scar of absence that echoed across history. From this wound, the Triumvirate drew strength and purpose. They waged a hidden campaign against the surviving Jedi, not in open war, but in attrition, assassins, shadows, disappearances, entire enclaves erased. Nihilus consumed Jedi worlds. Sion's followers hunted down masters in exile. Traya undermined faith itself, teaching that to trust the Force was to invite betrayal. This era explored more than power. It revealed the long cost of war and trauma, how repeated cataclysms could twist the Force and those who touched it for millennia to come. Yet, as with so many Sith, their extremism turned inward. Nihilus's hunger left him vulnerable. Sion's endless pain became a cage. Traya's philosophy drove her to engineer her own defeat. Their downfall would shape the path ahead, proving once again that while the Sith often destroy themselves, the scars they leave behind never truly fade. Vitiate's long game, a hidden empire in the cold of space. Their downfall would shape the path ahead, proving once again that while the Sith often destroy themselves, the scars they leave behind never truly fade. Yet in the cold dark, between the stars, another scar had already begun to fester, far from Jedi records and Republic charts, while the galaxy nursed its wounds in the wake of Revan Malak and the Triumvirate. A different Sith Empire waited in silence, hidden deep in the unknown regions. It was not a scattered cult or a desperate remnant. It was organized, disciplined, and ancient. The story of this empire began long before the Jedi Civil War, and for thousands of years it grew in the shadows. While the Republic believed the main Sith threat had been erased, at its center stood one figure known by many names. Tenebrae Lord, Vitiate the immortal Emperor, born on a distant Sith world. He had discovered a terrible path to power through forbidden rituals. He learned to consume the life energy of entire worlds, draining every living thing to feed his own existence. One of his earliest atrocities, the destruction of Nathema, left a dead, silent planet, an empty wound in the Force. And from that void, he emerged effectively ageless, sustained by unthinkable hunger. Vitiate forged survivors of the old Sith Empire into something new. He led them away from a known space to a hidden world called Dromun Kars. What they found there would change everything. A storm-racked jungle world steeped in the dark side became the heart of a secret empire. There he built a vast capital, an imperial order with legions fleets and an iron hierarchy, all devoted to the emperor whose true nature few understood from this frozen vantage point. Beyond the galactic map, Vitiate watched the Republic rebuild. He sent agents, smugglers, mercenaries, and Sith infiltrators to probe its defenses. He studied trade routes and border systems, quietly testing how quickly the Jedi could respond to crises. What followed was a long, patient campaign of manipulation. Wars flared on distant frontiers. Pirates harassed key lanes. Entire sectors destabilized without ever knowing they were pieces on an unseen board. Many threats that seemed new and unconnected were in truth echoes of this hidden empire's design rogue darkside cults, mysterious armadas, and sudden resurgences of Sith doctrine, all traced back to Vitiate's will. His servants whispered to warlords, tempted ambitious senators, and nurtured resentment on worlds the Republic had neglected. Each small conflict would shape the next, preparing the galaxy for a return of Sith power on a scale not seen since Naga Sado for the Jedi Order. This was a quiet era of vigilance and complacency. They sensed turbulence in the Force, but the old legends of great Sith empires felt distant, almost abstract, yet far beyond their reach. An armada was being forged, a disciplined empire drilling for war for millennia to come. The hidden Sith sharpened their blades until at last the Emperor judged the time had come, and the great galactic war moved from distant possibility to inevitable future. The old Republic's last great wars, Sith legions and Jedi orders. The armada that emerged from deep space was not a scattered cult or a desperate remnant. It was a restored Sith empire, disciplined and cruel, guided by an immortal emperor whose will had been sharpened for centuries. In the dark, the great galactic war had begun, and what followed was a long drawn-out struggle that would shape the fate of both Republic and Jedi Order. At first, the Sith offensive was a storm. Worlds fell in rapid succession. Coruscant itself was threatened as Sith legions poured from dagger-shaped warships and Dark Lords led assaults in person. This was not the lone master and secret apprentice of later centuries. This was a hierarchy echoing the ancient Golden Age Empire, with a dark council of powerful lords beneath the Emperor and countless apprentices and soldiers beneath them. The galaxy watched an old nightmare return in organized form. The war unfolded in brutal campaigns along the core and outer rim. Sacking of worlds, bombardments, and duels between Jedi Masters and Sith Lords became almost routine. Each side called on the Force and on technology to gain an edge, but neither could land a final decisive blow. The Republic still possessed vast resources, and the Jedi still guarded crucial hyperlanes. The Scythe had ruthless initiative and an Emperor willing to sacrifice entire systems to gain a single advantage over time. The conflict ground both powers down the story of this era is not one of a single cataclysmic battle, but of attrition, fleets destroyed, then rebuilt planets, occupied, then liberated borders that shifted back and forth until even victory felt hollow. Eventually, a shocking Sith attack on Coruscant forced the Republic into negotiation. The Treaty of Coruscant ended open war, but it did not bring peace. It created something colder, an uneasy division of the galaxy and a long, tense Cold War. In this Cold War, spies replaced fleets, proxy battles replaced open campaigns, Jedi and Sith clashed on remote worlds while diplomats smiled through clenched teeth at galactic summits. The Scythe Empire held vast territories, ruled by lords who taxed worlds dry and trained new generations in the dark side for thousands of years of accumulated doctrine were compressed into academies on Korriban and Droman-Kars, teaching that conflict was the only path to power, yet the same philosophy that made the Sith strong in war also hollowed them out from within rival lords. Sabotaged campaigns to embarrass their peers. Assassins removed promising commanders before they became threats. Civil wars flared on distant fronts, even as the Republic struggled to recover. The Emperor's empire looked unstoppable on star charts, but inside it was a maze of grudges, vendettas, and quiet treason. One day a future Sith would study this pattern, the rise of great legions, the waste of endless infighting, the way victory slipped away at the moment of greatest strength, and that dark mind would reach a quiet conclusion. The Sith could not truly conquer the galaxy as an army of rivals. They would need a new doctrine, a smaller, colder order, hidden in plain sight. And the first whisper of that idea was about to enter Sith history. From many to two. The vision of Darth Bane. That whisper would find its voice in a single man, a miner's son from the world of Apathros, who clawed his way into the Sith Brotherhood and took a new name Darth Bane around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin the Sith were not hidden and careful. They were many, loud and divided. They called themselves the Brotherhood of Darkness, and they were locked in a long, brutal war with the Jedi and the Republic on the surface. This brotherhood seemed strong. Dozens of Dark Lords, legions of troops, vast arsenals of weapons. But beneath that display of power lay the old Sith weakness. Every Lord wanted more. Every general believed they deserved command. Every victory fed rivalries that never truly slept the dark side. Rewarded ambition, and in this crowded order, ambition meant constant internal conflict. Darth Bane watched this carefully. He was ruthless, but also perceptive, where others chased rank. He searched for understanding in forgotten archives and ancient tombs. He uncovered records of Naga Sado of Exarchon, and most importantly, he found Revan's holocron. What they found there would change everything in its flickering projections. Revan spoke of discipline, of focused power, of how scattered Sith legions had always fallen to their own hungerbane. Studied these lessons and reached a simple, terrifying conclusion. The Sith had failed for thousands of years, not because they were too few, but because there were too many armies of Dark Lords only created more targets, more betrayals, more chances for the Jedi to exploit division. True dominance required concentration, not expansion. One master to embody the dark side, one apprentice to challenge and eventually replace them. This was the seed of a new doctrine, the rule of two around him. The Brotherhood prepared a final campaign against the Jedi. Their leader, Lord Kayan, believed unity could be forced through slogans and oaths. He gathered his lords on the world of Ruusan to unleash a devastating ritual, a thought bomb powered by their combined energies. It was meant to annihilate the Jedi. Instead, Ban saw an opportunity. What followed was not open rebellion, but quiet manipulation. He encouraged their arrogance, fed their certainty that no power could match them when the ritual began. He remained safely away as the gathered Sith poured their strength into the unstable technique. The thought bomb detonated in a single impossible instant. It erased almost every Sith Lord on Ruusan and countless Jedi as well, leaving behind only scorched earth and a wound in the Force. From that silence, Bane emerged as the last true Sith Lord. But even he would not stand alone on the ruined battlefields. He found a Force-sensitive girl named Rain. He sensed her darkness, her potential. He took her as his apprentice, renaming her Zana, and together they vanished into the shadows. The story of the Sith would change from open empires to a hidden lineage, two at a time, patient, cold, and waiting for millennia to come. The rule of two, one to hold power, one to crave it. From that moment in the ruins with Bane and Zana, the nature of Sith power changed the age of armies, and banners was over. What followed was a quieter darkness, patient, deliberate, and far more dangerous. It was defined by a single idea. The rule of two, one to hold power, one to crave it on the surface, The rule of two sounded simple. A master who embodied the current pinnacle of Sith knowledge and an apprentice driven by hunger to surpass them. But beneath that simplicity lay a harsh logic. The master would guard the accumulated secrets of the dark side. The rituals, the law, the hidden techniques. The apprentice would test that power, constantly probing for weakness, waiting for the moment to strike. And when the apprentice finally overthrew the master, the cycle would renew stronger than before. This structure turned the old Sith obsession with conflict inward, instead of legions of dark lords tearing an empire apart each generation, focused its ambition on a single target. The master. There were still duels, there was still betrayal, but it was contained, disciplined, almost ritualized. This prevented the kind of galactic civil wars that had shattered every previous Sith empire, while still preserving the constant pressure that the dark side demanded over time. This relentless succession would shape the line that followed Bane. Each master had to be cunning enough to survive an apprentice dedicated to their destruction. Each apprentice had to be patient enough to learn everything before making a move. Reckless aggression meant failure. Subtlety meant survival. The result was a lineage that grew quieter, more careful, more skilled in hiding from the Jedi. For thousands of years, the Jedi watched the galaxy and saw no Sith empires, no red banners, no fleets rising from the corridor. They believed the Sith extinct closed chapter of history, while in reality, the Bane endured in the shadow past an apprentice, moving from world to world-changing names, abandoning lairs whenever the Jedi came too close. The secrecy became an article of faith, as important as any dark side ritual. The Sith of this era did not compete for planets. They competed for anonymity. They learned to move behind galactic institutions to influence trade routes, senates, corporations and crime syndicates, rather than ruling openly. They corrupted from within. This was the story of a hidden empire, without borders or flags, an empire of influence. What they found there would change everything when one generation finally realized that the greatest battlefield was not the Outer Rim, but the Republic itself. From this refined lineage would one day emerge. Darth Plague is a master obsessed with bending life and death, and his apprentice, Darth Sidious, a politician from Naboo who would turn the Jedi Order's confidence into their greatest vulnerability. Their schemes lay ahead, but the quiet rule that made them possible began here, two at a time in the dark, waiting for millennia to come. Bane's legacy, Zana, successors, and the art of disappearing from that quiet rule of two. The line of Bane continued like a hidden fracture beneath the galactic order, invisible on the surface, but always under pressure, always ready to break everything above it. The story of his legacy begins with his chosen heir, a girl who had learned to survive war long before she learned to shape the Force. Her name was Rain. Reborn as Darth Zana, where Bane embodied brute strength and explosive rage, Zana represented a colder precision. She studied not only the blade, but the mind. She listened, she observed, she learned how fear moved through a person, how doubt hollowed out conviction, and what followed was a new refinement of Sith power, subtle, psychological, and patient under Bane's harsh training. Zana mastered Sith sorcery, drawn from ancient holocrons and the buried lore of the old Empire. She specialized in illusions and mental assaults, conjuring visions so vivid they could shatter sanity in battle. She often appeared almost passive, letting enemies exhaust themselves while she quietly poisoned their thoughts. She proved that the dark side did not need to roar to destroy. It could whisper as Bane aged, his obsession with survival grew. He sought ways to anchor his essence beyond death, fearing that his apprentice might not be strong enough to replace him. Yet the rule of two demanded a reckoning, one master, one apprentice. No exceptions, their final confrontation came on Ambria, a world already scarred by dark rituals there, in a storm of lightning blades and sorcery. Master and apprentice tested the Lawburn had created. Bane relied on overwhelming physical power and raw force energy. Zana relied on endurance, precision, and her terrible gift for breaking minds. She unleashed tendrils of dark side sorcery that clawed at his consciousness, twisting perception and identity. In the end, legends disagree whether Bane's spirit tried to leap into her body or simply fell before her will. But the outcome was clear. Zannah stood alive, unbroken, and recognized as the new Dark Lord. The line endured exactly as intended. From that point, the Bane lineage turned fully toward the shadows. Each new Sith inherited not vast armies, but techniques of concealment. They infiltrated institutions instead of fortresses. They built financial networks instead of battle fleets. They cultivated allies who never knew. They served the Sith fortunes, accumulated on core worlds, shell corporations spread through the mid-rim, and quiet donations bought influence in senates and guilds. These lords of the rule of two understood that grand open war had doomed the old Sith empires, so they chose a slower path. They weakened the Republic, not with fleets, but with corruption. They nudged worlds into economic dependence, eroded trust in the Jedi, and encouraged conflicts the Order could never fully resolve for thousands of years. The Sith became a rumor, a superstition, a word in old archives, while the real danger sat in boardrooms and private chambers. Over generations, their methods grew more precise. Some specialized in finance, others in espionage, still, others in biology and forbidden force experiments. Each pair added a new tool to the quiet arsenal of the dark side. And somewhere down this line, a mind would finally see the full potential of the Republic's own systems, its laws, its bureaucracy, its wars as weapons to be turned inward. The next great Sith would not just hide from the Galactic Order, they would wear its colors and command its armies. The question was simply, who would be the first to try? Darth Plagueis the Wise. Experiments in life, death, and destiny. The answer came from the banking halls rather than the battlefield. A Sith Lord who did not rule from a throne of skulls, but from a boardroom of ledgers and credit flows. His name in public was Hego Damask, a moon magnate of the intergalactic banking clan in secret. He was Darth Plagueis the Wise, last great. Architect of the Bane line Plagueis understood that in the new galactic order, power no longer wore armor. It wore tailored robes and senatorial smiles. He turned corporate charters and loan guarantees into chains subtler than any slave collar. Whole sectors owed their survival to his investments. Planetary governments bent under quiet debt obligations, and behind it all, his Sith identity vanished into shell companies and banking codes. For thousands of years, the Sith had tried to crush the Republic from the outside through war invasion. An open empire Plagueis studied that history and drew a colder conclusion. True, victory would not come from another grand crusade. It would come when the Republic signed its own surrender, hidden in the fine print of emergency bills and financial relief acts. But his ambitions stretched far beyond politics. They reached into the very fabric of the Force itself. Plagueis became obsessed with midi-chlorians, the microscopic life forms that allowed all beings to. Teaching touched the Force, where other Sith saw them as a conduit. He saw a control system, something that could be studied, manipulated, even rewritten. What followed was a series of secret experiments on prisoners, on clones, on himself. He learned to sustain life, to hold a dying body on the edge of death. With the dark side like an invisible tourniquet, he probed the boundary between existence and the void, believing that if he could master life and death, the Sith would never again lose their hard-won power in his vision. The rule of two would shape galactic destiny forever, because no Sith would ever truly die. This was the refinement of the Sith grand plan. Control the Republic from within, engineer crises on demand, and present Sith-guided order. As the only cure, the wars would still come, but they would be orchestrated wars scripted in advance by financiers and senators who answered to a single hidden master for such a design. Plagueis needed an apprentice who could walk both corridors of power, the shadowed and the public, on the peaceful world of Naboo. He found a gifted young politician named Palpatine, ambitious, intelligent, outwardly courteous. What they found there would change everything. Plagueis revealed the dark side to him, gave him a new name, Darth Sidious, and began shaping him as both statesman and weapon. Together, master and apprentice plotted a future where trade disputes could ignite galactic war, where manufactured chaos would sweep aside the old order. Yet in training Sidious to think beyond limits, Plagueis repeated the oldest Sith mistake he believed he alone controlled the game. He failed to see that his apprentice was already studying a different lesson, how to seize everything for himself. Darth Sidious rises. From Naboo, senator to hidden Dark Lord, power corrupts. But when that power is wrapped in courtesy and soft-spoken charm, it becomes far harder to see and far easier to obey. In the bright halls of the Galactic Senate, the Sith finally learned to smile on the surface. Palpatine of Naboo appeared unremarkable. A mid-level senator from a peaceful world, polite to colleagues, deferential to the Chancellor, always speaking of stability negotiation and the noble traditions of the Republic. He moved slowly through committees and councils, listening more than he spoke, answering outrage with calm concern. And in that measured restraint, he began to gather quiet trust behind that mask. Lived Darth Sidious, the latest heir to the Bane line, and the story of his rise would shape the fate of the entire galaxy in secret. He reached beyond the Senate chamber into the shadow economy of the core worlds. He courted executives from the Trade Federation, banking clans and corporate alliances, promising influence in future legislation while demanding only loyalty and discretion in return. The same soft voice that reassured senators also spoke in encrypted channels to crime lords and spice cartels on worlds like Nalhuta and Ord Mantell. Sidious understood that real power flowed not only through laws but through fear debt and dependency. And what followed was a slow, careful weaving of favors, threats, and secrets into a web that touched every level of galactic society. As his influence expanded, his patience with his master diminished. Darth Plagueis had taught him to think in centuries, to treat the Republic as a patient to be slowly poisoned. But the apprentice had learned a different lesson. The rule of two demanded succession through betrayal. On the eve of his political breakthrough, Palpatine turned that doctrine into action in a luxurious penthouse high above Coruscant. The master, who had dreamed of cheating death, drank too deeply, celebrated too confidently, and never woke again with that quiet murder. The Bane lineage passed fully to Sidious unchallenged. Now both faces belonged entirely to him. In the Senate, he played the concerned representative from a distant world, lamenting trade disputes and border tensions in the underworld. He pushed those same disputes toward blockade and open conflict. Each crisis was carefully calibrated, never enough to collapse the system, only enough to justify stronger security measures. Emergency debates, broader executive authority, through agents like Darth Maul and later Count Dooku. Sidious began to prepare both sides of a future war. He whispered separatist grievances into one ear while promising protection and order to core world loyalists. With every manufactured outrage, the Republic edged closer to a conflict that would hand its Chancellor unprecedented power. For thousands of years, the Jedi had believed the Sith destroyed. Now the Sith prepared to use the Jedi's own role as peacekeepers against them. Somewhere in the near future, clones would march under gleaming armor, Star Destroyers would rise from shipyards, and the Guardians of the Old Order would be asked to fight a war they did not start. The only question left was who had truly started it. The Phantom Menace, Maul, trade disputes, and a test of the Jedi. The answer to that question begins above a quiet green world in the Mid-Rim, a world that should have been insignificant in galactic history. Naboo was peaceful, artistic, removed from the great trade lanes, and yet it became the first open move in Darth Sidious's long-game power. In the Republic did not only flow through the Senate, it moved through guild charters and trade monopolies. Sidious understood this. The Trade Federation had grown rich, controlling hyperspace routes and shipping tariffs, but they were burdened by new taxation of trade routes to outlying systems. What followed was a carefully engineered grievance, Sidious in his public mask, as Senator Palpatine whispered that there were legal avenues to protest that a show of force might bend the Senate using the Federation's fear of lost profit. He guided them into a blockade of Naboo on paper. It was legal, a corporate enforcement action, exploiting loopholes in Republican law in practice. It was an act of war. Starships formed a ring of durasteel around the planet, and the people below were slowly strangled by embargo, food, medicine, and communication. All became weapons. The dark side moved through bureaucratic language and trade disputes as surely as through lightning and blades, for the first time in centuries, the Jedi Order was sent to mediate a crisis that had been designed to test them. The Council dispatched Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, expecting negotiations. What they found there would change everything. Instead of diplomacy, they encountered a phantom from the past, a silent hunter sent to ensure that talks failed. This was Darth Maul, a Zabrak warrior raised from childhood in the service of Sidious, covered in black and red tattoos that marked him as a creature of the dark side. Maul was not a politician. He was a weapon trained to track, to intimidate, and to kill, where previous Sith Lords in this timeline had juggled empires and cults. Maul embodied a different philosophy under the rule of 2. The Apprentice existed to enforce the Master's will without question on the desert world of Tatooine. Maul revealed himself pursuing the Queen's ship through dust and twin suns, his double-bladed lightsaber igniting in a crimson arc against Qui-Gon's green blade. For thousands of years, the Jedi had believed the Sith extinct. That single clash shattered that certainty. The Order now knew. The Sith had returned, but not how long they had been planning, or how deep the corruption ran in the Senate chambers on Coruscant. Sidious harvested the crisis he had sown. The suffering of Naboo created sympathy for its young queen, and outrage at the Senate's paralysis. Confidence in Chancellor Valorum eroded under whispers of weakness and indecision. Guided by Palpatine's counsel, amid this orchestrated chaos, Padme called for a vote of no confidence. This act of mercy toward her people unintentionally propelled Palpatine forward. He became Chancellor, not through open conquest but through legal process and public acclaim. The story of the Sith had entered a new phase. No longer distant emperors or hidden cults, but a dark lord, wrapped in democratic robes. Yet this was only a test, a controlled fire to study how the Republic and the Jedi would respond. The blockade ended. Maul fell on Naboo. Yet Sidious gained exactly what he wanted: political power, intelligence on Jedi tactics, and proof that the galaxy was ready to accept extraordinary measures in the name of security. Soon, the manufactured crisis of Naboo would be eclipsed by a manufactured war one that would shape the fate of the Jedi Order for millennia to come. Apprentices in the shadows, Tyrannus, the clone army, and a manufactured war. The manufactured crisis on Naboo had proven one thing above all else: the galaxy would accept fear as the foundation of a new order. If that fear felt justified in the quiet that followed, another figure stepped out of the light and into the shadows, a man who had once sworn himself to the Jedi. Code Count Dooku of Sereno had been a respected Jedi master, a duelist of rare precision, and a philosopher who questioned easy answers over decades. He watched the Senate drown in corruption, watched corporations buy influence, watched the Jedi Council ignore warning signs in the name of tradition. Power corrupts, but when that power is wrapped in procedure and law, it can be harder to see. He walked away from the Order publicly, a lost idealist privately. Something far darker was already calling to him in the hidden corridors of galactic politics. Dooku found Darth Sidious, or perhaps it was Sidious who found him. What followed was a careful seduction framed as clarity. Sidious spoke to Dooku's disillusionment, to his anger at the Republic's decay. He promised not chaos but control, not revenge but renewal. Through the dark side in time, the former Jedi Master accepted the offer that would shape the fate of the Republic. He cast aside his old name and became Darth Tyrannus, the newest heir to our rule of 2. As Tyrannus, he moved with cold elegance. He did not hide behind a mask. He became the public face of a growing separatist movement, gathering star systems disillusioned with the Senate's paralysis, commerce guilds seeking fewer restrictions, idealists convinced that secession was the only answer to corruption on the surface. It looked like a political rebellion. Beneath it was a Sith design for galactic war years earlier. Under Sidious's orders, Tyrannus had taken a quieter journey to the storm-racked world of Kamino. There the Kaminoans offered what they had perfected, an army grown in vats, obedient, precise, accelerated to maturity. What they found there would change everything. Tyrannus commissioned a vast clone army for the Republic, but he did it under a stolen identity, using the name of a dead Jedi Master, Sifo Dyas, as cover. The Jedi believed their fallen colleague had acted alone. The Senate believed the army was a fortunate asset. No one saw the Sith hand that had paid for it. The symmetry was chilling Sidious, and Tyrannus commanded the separatist droid legions in secret, while the same master controlled the clone forces that would oppose them. Every battle, every loss, every victory fed the same design. The story of the Clone Wars was never about choosing a winner. It was about exhausting the Jedi Order, isolating them from the public, and justifying ever greater emergency powers in the Chancellor's hands. Soon, the first shots of this manufactured war would echo across the galaxy, and with them, the quiet beginning of the Jedi's final downfall. The Clone Wars, a galaxy at war, a Sith in control, and so the galaxy slid into open war, a conflict presented as tragic necessity, but designed in secret as a precise instrument of control. Across 1,000 worlds, fleets clashed, armies burned, and citizens looked to Coruscant for protection from a storm their own leaders had summoned. On the surface, the Clone Wars were the story of heroic defense. The Republic fielded legions of identical soldiers led by Jedi generals who had once been peacekeepers, not warriors. What followed was a relentless grind of campaigns from Geonosis to Christophsis, from Umbara's shadowed trenches to the frozen fields of Orta Plutonia. Each battle framed as another step towards security, another sacrifice in the name of order. In truth, every victory and every defeat fed the same design. When the Separatists gained ground fear spiked, and the Senate granted more emergency powers to Chancellor Palpatine, when the clones pushed them back, relief washed through the public. But the war did not end. It simply shifted to a new front, prolonging the crisis that justified his rule. The Republic was winning and losing at the exact pace the Sith required. Behind the lines, the cost grew heavier. Worlds were devastated, trade routes shattered, entire populations uprooted. The Jedi led from the front, and the price was subtle but devastating. Their robes became armor. Their meditation chambers became war rooms. The Guardians of Peace were now symbols of endless conflict. Palpatine encouraged this transformation with quiet precision. He praised the Jedi as indispensable, yet kept them outside the true halls of power. He met privately with senators, business leaders, and governors, while the Order bled in distant campaigns to the public. The Jedi became remote figures, commanders, not companions, and their ancient role in galactic history began to fade. Within this carefully managed storm, one figure drew Sidious's special attention: Anakin Skywalker. The war elevated him from gifted knight to living legend. His daring rescues on Christophsis, his duel with Dooku above Coruscant, his survival against impossible odds, all reinforced a narrative that he was the Republic's chosen champion. This would shape his fall. Palpatine fed Anakin's doubts with gentle concern. He listened when the Council did not. He framed Anakin's attachments as strengths rather than weaknesses, and suggested that the Jedi were holding him back from his true potential. The dark side thrives on fear, and Anakin's fear of loss. His visions of death and failure became fertile ground. The Jedi sensed the dark, but not its source. They knew a Sith Lord guided the war, yet he sat in their council chamber as a trusted ally, hidden in plain sight. Each new emergency decree, each extension of Palpatine's term, was explained away as temporary, necessary, unavoidable. For thousands of years, the Order had trusted the Republic. Now that trust was being weaponized against them. As the war dragged into its final years, the clone army's loyalty seemed absolute. Their discipline unquestioned, their camaraderie. With the Jedi genuine but buried in their very minds lay a single command, a dormant key to annihilation. When the moment was right, Sidious would speak a number, and in one synchronized breath, the entire war would turn inward against the Order that had fought it. Order 66. The night the Jedi fell. The day the Sith won. When the key was finally turned, it did not begin with blaster fire. It began in an opera box above the glittering lights of Coruscant. There, the Chancellor of the Republic quietly unmasked himself as something far older and far darker than any politician. The story of the Clone Wars narrowed to two figures in the half-dark of that chamber: Palpatine And Anakin Skywalker, softly, almost gently Palpatine, admitted the truth. He was Darth Sidious' heir to the rule of two architect of the conflict that had consumed the galaxy, and he offered Anakin something the Jedi could not: the power to stop death, the power to save Padme from the visions that haunted his sleep. This was the culmination of a promise the dark side had been whispering to Anakin for years: power without restraint, protection without sacrifice. What followed was a choice that would shape galactic history when Mace Windu moved to arrest the Chancellor. The careful mask finally cracked. The duel in the Chancellor's office ended, with Windu disarmed and Anakin standing at the edge of fate to save Padme. Anakin struck, betrayed the Jedi, and knelt before Sidious. In that moment, the prophecy's chosen one accepted a new name: Darth Vader, the last apprentice in a line that stretched back for thousands of years, to Darth Bane with his new servant bound by fear and obsession. Sidious turned to the other half of his design order. 66 was not an improvisation. It was an embedded command hidden in the clones' minds, a single phrase tied to biochips and conditioning laid in place long before the war began. When Sidious spoke the number to Commander Cody and the others, the clones did not hesitate. They simply complied across the galaxy. The change was almost quiet. A nod from a commander, a brief pause in marching feet, then blasters turned on Jedi. Generals on Utapau. Obi-Wan was blasted from a cliff on Felucia. Ayla Secura fell beneath the fire of troops she had trusted on Maigato Kashyyyk. The pattern repeated. Comrades became executioners in a heartbeat. It felt less like sudden betrayal and more like a trap, finally springing after years of tension, tragic inevitability written into the wall. From its first day in the Senate chamber, Sidious stood scarred by his own lightning voice. Trembling with rehearsed outrage, he named the Jedi traitors, claimed they had attempted a coup, and in the same breath proposed a solution: the Republic would be reorganized into the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society. The thunderous applause that followed drowned out the last echoes of the Jedi Order for millennia to come. Historians would mark that day as the night the Jedi fell, and the day the Sith won after thousands of years of hidden schemes, failed empires, and forgotten tombs. The dark side finally sat openly on the Imperial throne. For a time, the Sith no longer needed shadows. The galaxy itself had become their order. The age of the Empire, Vader, Inquisitors, and hunting the last Naithawati. Celebration in the Senate chamber marked more than a political transition. It marked the moment the Sith no longer needed to pretend in public. The new galactic empire rose from the ashes of the Republic, and standing just behind the Emperor was the shape that would haunt the galaxy for decades. A towering figure in black armor and a breathing rasp that echoed like a mechanical grave. This was Darth Vader, the Emperor's right hand and the living symbol of Sith power. Where Sidious ruled through decrees and hidden schemes, Vader ruled through fear. Star systems learned quickly that rebellion was not an abstract crime. It had a face, a voice, and the sound of approaching boots. When his Star Destroyer emerged from hyperspace, the conflict was already decided. Worlds surrendered before a single shot was fired. Vader became the visible edge of an invisible order. The story of the Empire's early years was the story of his shadow crossing one world after another. Jedi beacons that once guided travelers now stood dark. Those who still dared to answer them found something else waiting. What they found there would change everything. Not rescue, but hunters to finish what Order 66 began. Sidious created a new instrument, the Inquisitorius. These were dark side agents, former Jedi fallen adepts and Force-sensitive recruits, broken and reforged to serve the Sith. They carried red blades, they interrogated prisoners, they scoured archives and rumors, tracking any hint of a surviving Jedi or an untrained child strong in the Force. In this way, the Sith extended their reach without breaking the rule of two. The Inquisitors were not true Sith Lords. They were tools. What followed was a slow and methodical extinguishing of the last lights of the old order. Scattered Jedi tried to resist some staged brief uprisings on distant worlds. Others attempted to rebuild tiny enclaves, only to be rooted out by Inquisitors and finished by Vader. A few chose another path, They vanished into deep hiding, becoming quiet guardians. Farmers, hermits, wanderers watching over remote communities or a single child and waiting for a future they could not clearly see. At the center of this long night stood Vader himself. For thousands of years, Sith had preached that the past must be killed, that mercy was weakness. Yet inside the armored enforcer, there remained buried fragments of Anakin Skywalker memories of a Tatooine slave, a forbidden husband, a would-be savior of the Jedi Order. This internal conflict would shape the fate of the Sith more than any campaign or decree. In rare moments facing defeated Jedi or innocent bystanders, the mask hesitated, the blade paused. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, not because it happened often, but because it happened at all. Each hesitation was a fracture in the perfect armor of the dark side, and through those fractures the future began to seep in. Whispers of rebellion spread: smugglers, ferried fugitives, senators conspired in shadows, and somewhere on a desert world, a boy stared. At twin suns dreaming of the stars, the Sith Empire appeared eternal, yet the Force was already aligning its next move, and the child whose name Vader did not yet know was about to step onto the board. The original trilogy, Sidious, Vader, and the fragility of Sith, Triumph. That boy would grow into Luke Skywalker, and with him, the long-hidden designs of the Sith finally met open resistance. From the Sith perspective, the Galactic Civil War was not just a rebellion, it was a stress test of the rule of two in A New Hope. The destruction of Alderaan, the hunt for the stolen Death Star plans, and the Battle of Yavin were all viewed through a single lens: control. The Death Star was meant to freeze the galaxy in fear. Yet in its shadow, Sidious and Vader sensed something else: a new light in the Force. Luke's survival at Yavin was not only a military failure, it was a disturbance in the dark side. Sidious recognized the name Skywalker and understood what that could mean for his carefully constructed order. What followed was a period of calculated opportunity and quiet alarm as the Empire tightened its grip, and the Sith began to consider how this anomaly might be turned to their advantage by the time of The Empire Strikes Back. The story of the Sith had entered a new phase. Vader became hunter as much as enforcer, scouring the galaxy for the pilot who had destroyed the Death Star. This was more than vengeance. It was recruitment in disguise. The Dark Lord saw in Luke a reflection of his own lost potential, a chance to overthrow Sidious and claim ultimate power in the classic Sith pattern. Sidious saw the same thing, but from a higher vantage to him. Luke was a rare convergence raw power, Skywalker blood and Jedi. Training not yet complete, he encouraged Vader's search while quietly planning to claim the boy for himself. Luke was not a threat. He was a resource, a possible replacement for a damaged apprentice and a way to renew the Sith line for millennia to come on Bespin. Vader's revelation, "I am your father," was a weapon forged from truth. Luke's horror and refusal created a fracture Vader had not expected, the conflict that once drove Anakin to the dark side. Attachment, fear, and desperate love now returned in a different form. A father torn between master and son. Return of the Jedi brought this tension to its breaking point. Sidious orchestrated Luke's arrival on the second Death Star, confident that every move had been foreseen. He allowed the rebel attack to unfold as bait, certain that both Skywalkers would kneel or die in his throne room. He unleashed the full cruelty of the dark side, hurling lightning through Luke's body to break his will and bind him in terror. In that moment, the rule of two balanced on a knife's edge. Luke's refusal to strike his father down shattered Sidious's perfect script and exposed the one weakness the Sith had never erased from Anakin Skywalker. Compassion, this act of mercy, would reshape galactic history. Vader's choice to lift his master and cast him into the reactor shaft ended Sidious's visible reign and mortally wounded himself, with the Emperor consumed in light and Vader dying beneath his son's gaze. The Bane line appeared to end. There were no hidden apprentices, no surviving Dark Lords. The rule of two was broken, And for the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy believed the Sith truly gone. But the dark side had never respected endings, and in distant shadows, old contingencies were already waiting to be found. After Endor, remnants, cults, and the shadow of the Sith, in the silence after Endor, the galaxy exhaled, but the dark side did not. The Emperor's death shattered the central pillar of the Imperial war machine. What followed was not a clean collapse, but a slow unraveling. Moffs and admirals seized fleets. Governors fortified their sectors. Warlords carved miniature empires from the bones of the old one. Some clung to authority, others to fear, and a few to something stranger. A kind of faith for them. Palpatine was not merely an emperor. He was a chosen vessel of the dark side, a figure whose power had remade galactic history for thousands of years. In secret, they spoke of him as a prophet of conflict, a man who had understood that the Force itself could be bent to pure will banners. Bearing his sigil became relics. Hollows of his speeches were replayed like sermons. The Empire was fading, but a darker devotion was hardening on distant worlds. That devotion took more focused form on Jakku, on Exegol, on forgotten moons in the unknown regions. Cults gathered around Sith icons and broken artifacts. The Sith Eternal was the most fanatical, a vast hidden congregation that treated the Sith not just as lords but as a religion. They excavated ancient blades and masks, studied tomes copied from Korriban and Zeost, and whispered rule of two doctrines they only half understood. These were not true Sith in the Bane tradition, but they were keepers of memory. They preserved holocrons that had survived the Clone Wars. They guarded cloning vats and occult machinery that had no place in any ordinary empire. In their rituals, the story of the Sith was recited as prophecy. Every rise, every fall, every war interpreted as steps toward a final return. This endurance was not an accident. Sidious had never trusted a single body, a single apprentice, or a single superweapon from his master Plagueis. He had learned to fear mortality and to plan beyond it. Contingency orders, like Operation Cinder, ensured that if he died, the galaxy would burn rather than celebrate. And in the unknown regions, navigational beacons and secret shipyards waited for followers who would not question why they had been summoned. While these shadows gathered, the light tried to rebuild Luke Skywalker, traveling from ruined temples to forgotten archives, sought to restore the Jedi Order. His search for lost Jedi wisdom inevitably led him into Sith history. He walked through places once ruled by Exar Kun and Naga Sadow. Sitzia felt echoes of Revan and Malak in old holo records and learned how often the Jedi had underestimated the dark. Each discovery brought knowledge and danger. Sith spirits, lingering in tombs, whispered offers of power. Cursed blades and masks radiated hunger. Some of this knowledge strengthened Luke's resolve. Some nearly consumed his students. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history when he chose restraint over destruction, preserving certain sites rather than erasing them entirely to most of the galaxy. The Sith were a closed chapter. A nightmare ended above Endor, but in the cold reaches beyond known space, fleets were being assembled, bodies were being grown, and voices, long dead, were being given new instruments somewhere in the unknown regions. Plans set in motion decades earlier were still unfolding, and the shadow of the Sith had not yet lifted. Exegol and the Final Order, the last great Sith resurrection in the farthest reaches of the unknown regions. There lay a world that did not appear on Republic charts or Imperial records, a planet erased from ordinary galactic history, yet central to the story of the Sith. This was Exegol, a storm-racked graveyard world where the sky itself seemed to bleed with lightning and the ground was carved into impossible monoliths and ritual arenas, all steeped in the dark side. Exegol was more than a hidden base. It was a shrine to a dead empire and a laboratory for its return beneath its black storms. The Sith Eternal toiled a fanatical cult that worshipped Darth Sidious as the culmination of every Dark Lord who had ever lived. Colossal shipyards hung in the choking clouds, birthing vast hidden fleets, while robed acolytes chanted in cavernous halls lined with statues of ancient Sith. Sidious had fallen at Endor, but death for him was only a transition through forbidden pathways of the Force. His spirit tore itself free and fled to prepared vessels, cloned bodies, grown in secret vats on Exegol through dark science and ritual he endured. Imperfectly, each clone decaying under the strain of his power, a twisted echo of the rule of two, sustained by machinery, alchemy, and endless sacrifice. What followed was the construction of the Final Order, a fleet of Ziston-class star destroyers, each one bearing a super laser capable of annihilating a world where the first Sith Empire had relied on sorcery, and the later Galactic Empire on fear and bureaucracy. This new armada fused both terror and technology into a single doctrine of instant obedience. One command, one volley. One planet gone for thousands of years, Sith had dreamed of ultimate victory. Exegol was meant to be the final expression of that dream within the Great Citadel. Sidious was bound to vast mechanisms surrounded by chanting cultists and robed figures as he prepared a ritual to transfer his essence into a more suitable vessel. The chosen vessel was Rey, the last heir of his bloodline, and the latest focal point of the Force's long struggle between Jedi and Sith Kylo Ren. Arrived first, drawn through the storms by a hidden wayfinder, and what they found there would change everything. In towering halls, he faced the truth of the Emperor's survival and the offer to rule beside him. Later, Rey followed, guided by ancient texts and desperate hope, while above them, the Resistance hurled itself against the impossible geometry of the Final Order fleet. In the arena of Exegol, Sidious called upon the power of all the Sith who had come before him, a living conduit of every dark oath and broken vow. But the Force answered with another chorus, the voices of Jedi, long dead, rising around Rey. In that collision of legacies, the Emperor was finally unmade. His body and machines obliterated his cult, scattered, his fleet shattered in the storm on Exegol. The organized Sith tradition appeared to die, its last great resurrection collapsing into dust, yet in a galaxy where the dark side has endured for millennia to come. Knowledge survives in fragments and whispers, and on forgotten worlds. There are still doors that have not been opened, patterns in the darkness, cycles of rise, fall, and return on Exegol. The last great empire of the Sith seemed to crumble into ash, yet the pattern beneath that collapse is far older than Palpatine or his cult. It stretches back through every era this story has passed through, from the first dark Jedi exiles to the modern lords who tried to rule the entire galactic order from the shadows again and again. The Sith have risen from defeat. The ancient dark Jedi, it lost the 100-year darkness and were cast out into the unknown. What they found there would change everything. A red-skinned species on Korriban and Zeost, bound in ritual and fear. The exiles conquered them, took their name, and forged the first Sith Empire. From that act of conquest flowed Marka Ragnos, Naga Sado, and the Great Hyperspace War. And what followed was the first great fall centuries later. Fragmented spirits and hidden cults kept the dark side alive. Freeden Nad on Onderon, Exar Kun on Yavin 4, Revan and Malak turning the ruins of the Mandalorian Wars into the Jedi Civil War. Each era looked new, each banner different, yet the pattern remained familiar. A wounded republic, a proud Jedi Order, and a Sith presence that stepped into existing fractures rather than creating them from nothing. During the Old Republic, the Sith Triumvirate fed on fear and absence. Darth Nihilus devouring worlds. Darth Sion refusing to die. Darth Trier waging silent war on the Force itself behind them. The hidden empire of Vitiate stretched from Droman Kars to the galactic core, exploiting instability, war fatigue, and political decay. The Sith did not invent those weaknesses, they magnified them later. Darth Bane stared at the ruins of yet another shattered Sith Empire and understood the cycle: too many lords, too much open conflict. So he created the Rule of Two. One Master, one apprentice power, concentrated secrecy. Absolute for thousands of years, the Bane line survived by hiding inside the very republic that thought them extinct. turning every crisis into an opportunity to tighten their grip. Sidious was simply the most successful expression of that design, orchestrating both sides of the Clone Wars, corrupting the Senate, eroding trust in the Jedi, until Anakin Skywalker's fear of loss made the final turn possible. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, a desperate attempt to save one life that delivered an empire to the dark side. Through all of this, Jedi and Sith remained entangled. Every major resurgence of the Sith began with a Jedi's doubt, Revan questioning the Council's inaction, Dooku losing faith in the Republic, Anakin unable to accept that some things must be let go. The Sith did not create those doubts. They weaponized them, seen from a distance. The Sith become less like distant monsters and more like extreme reflections of familiar impulses, fear of death, hunger for control, the refusal to accept limits. These patterns would shape galactic history for millennia to come. And as long as those impulses exist, the possibility of another whisper in the dark remains, lingering shadows. Sith artifacts, holocrons and unfinished stories, fear leaves traces, and in the galaxy of the Force, those traces rarely fade completely. When the last great Sith Lord falls, the dark side does not vanish. It settles, it seeps into stone and crystal, into forgotten chambers and buried vaults. The story of the Sith continues in silence through the relics they leave behind. Sith holocrons are the most dangerous of these remnants. At first glance, they are only crystalline shapes, geometric lattices of glass and metal resting on pedestals in tombs and ruins. But within each one lives an echo, a recorded intellect of a long-dead master waiting to be awakened. They speak in calm, measured tones, offering techniques the Jedi once forbade promises of power and certainty in a chaotic galaxy. What followed was rarely wisdom. Instead, each holocron becomes a patient teacher of corruption, drip-feeding secrets to any seeker who dares to listen on worlds like Korriban. The holocrons are only part of a larger graveyard of empires. The planet's red sands cover labyrinths of sarcophagi and catacombs, where the dark side has soaked into every stone for thousands of years. The air itself feels heavy. Their visions come unbidden, anger rises without cause. Even the most disciplined Jedi report hearing distant whispers. Zeost is colder, its forests and ruined cities steeped in a quieter malice, an old capital of a forgotten Sith empire reduced to a haunted shell. Exegol hides deeper still, a storm-racked world in the unknown regions where lightning carves the sky, and ancient statues watch over ritual arenas. These places do not merely remember the Sith, they amplify them even after the final defeat of Darth Sidious above Exegol, after the fall of his clones and his last hidden fleet. The galaxy does not become clean. Overnight, scavengers, prospectors, lost pilgrims all continue to stumble across Sith relics, a blade that hums with unnatural hunger, a mask that sharpens every resentment, a holocron that offers forbidden insight into life and death. Some turn away in fear. Others keep looking, convinced that one more secret will grant control over fate itself. Seen across galactic history, the Sith legacy becomes less a straight line and more a series of echoes, each new dark side adept influenced by those who came before, by a ritual on Korriban, a doctrine from Darth Bane, a fragment of Sidious's grand design. The names change, but the patterns repeat for millennia to come. Knowledge survives, even when orders fall tonight, though these lingering shadows are only distant tales. Quiet images of ruined temples and dormant crystals. They remain on their cold pedestals, their whispers far away. The dark side stays on the page and on the screen, while breathing slows and thought drifts, and as the story moves on, the artifacts wait undisturbed in the dark, from darkness to dream. The Sith's place in the Star Wars myth, in the quiet that follows ancient artifacts and silent halls, another pattern begins to emerge. The Sith are not only a faction in galactic history, they are a reflection of something older than any empire. They are what happens when fear reaches for power and refuses to let go. Through every era, the Sith stand for the same impulse, the belief that control can end pain, that if the galaxy can be bent and ordered tightly enough, loss will finally stop. Darth Revan seizing the Starforge to impose his vision. Darth Vitiate consuming entire worlds to escape death. Darth Sidious turning a republic into an empire to prevent what he calls chaos. Each is a different mask for the same terror of powerlessness. The Jedi face the same fear, but answer it differently where the Sith cling the Jedi release, where the Sith demand certainty. The Jedi accept change, the story of the Sith, and the Jedi is not a simple conflict between light and dark. It is a long argument over how to live with the inevitability of loss. One side reaches outward, grasping for control. The other turns inward, seeking balance and acceptance for thousands of years. Both orders look into the same force and ask the same questions. What is the right use of power? What should be protected? What can never be truly owned? What followed was not just war and betrayal, but a meditation acted out in starships and sabers on whether attachment must lead to fear and whether fear must always lead to anger. This is why the Sith timeline makes Star Wars more than a tale of heroes and villains, from the first Dark Jedi of the 100-Year Darkness to the fall of Vader and Sidious at Endor. The pattern repeats. Empires rise on promises of safety. They harden into tyranny. They collapse under the weight of their own obsession. The details shift. The lesson remains for millennia to come. Seen this way, the Sith become less distant, less theatrical. They resemble anyone who has been hurt and decides that never again is worth any cost. Anakin clutching at visions of Padme's death. Exar Kun refusing to surrender his talent to a council's judgment. Even lesser Dark Lords hiding in forgotten temples all walk the same narrowing path until only power and paranoia remain. As the narrative slows, the sharp edges of dates and names begin to soften. Individual wars blur into a gentle rhythm of rise and fall of desire and consequence of fear and the illusion of control. The Sith stand in that twilight as cautionary figures not to condemn, but to warn that any being pressed hard enough by loss might hear the dark side whispering that domination is the only protection in this drifting half-light. The grand conflicts of galactic history become distant tides. The Force itself feels quieter. The story of the Sith turns from a chronicle of battles into a low, steady echo, a reminder that even as empires burn and orders fall, the deepest struggle has always been within. Closing the holocron, drifting away from the Aetian. Sith timeline. In that quiet inner struggle, the vast sweep of Sith history begins to feel distant. The names and battles that once defined entire eras soften into a single long shadow cast across the galaxy, from the first Dark Jedi who broke with the Order during the 100-Year Darkness to the exiles who stepped onto the red sands of Korriban. The story of the Sith has always been a journey from light into dark and back again. What followed was an age of tomb worlds and stone-faced statues of Ajunta Pal and Marka Ragnos carved beneath blood-red skies, their empire rising in secrecy while the Republic slept for thousands of years. That pattern repeated. Sith warlords on Ziost and Korriban reaching for power, Jedi fleets answering in kind, the great hyperspace war, blazing briefly and then collapsing into ruin until only scattered spirits and hidden holocrons remained in forgotten temples. Naga Sado's sarcophagus sealed his body away, but not his influence. The dark side lingered in those halls, waiting for the next mind willing to listen. Then came new seekers of power, Revan and Malak in the Old Republic era, turning the scars of the Mandalorian Wars into an excuse for conquest. The Starforge burning in the depths of space as fleets clashed and worlds fell. What they found there would change everything, not just for the Republic, but for the Sith as well. The cycle adapted new faces, same hunger. The Triumvirate in the shadows, the hidden empire of Tenebrae, stretching its will across centuries later. Darth Bane walked through the ashes of yet another failed Sith Order and answered endless infighting with a single ruthless idea: the rule of two. one master, one apprentice, an unbroken line that would shape the galaxy in silence for millennia. To come from Xana to Plagueis, from Plagueis to Sidious, the Sith became a whisper instead of a banner, a wound beneath the skin of the Republic that no healer could see. Eventually, that whisper erupted into open war. Sidious Maul, Tyrannus Vader, the fall of the Jedi, the birth of the Empire, and then at Endor and Exegol, the final storms as cloned bodies failed and ancient plans unraveled. Even then, the pattern held an empire of darkness, followed by ruin. A sky once filled with star destroyers, left to the quiet turning of stars. Now imagine that galaxy after the fires have gone out. Battlefields on distant moons, grown cold and still crashed. Walkers half buried in sand Sith temples, standing silent under alien skies, their corridors empty. But for drifting dust and the faint memory of chanting acolytes overhead, the galactic disk spins on uncaring to the wars that once scarred it, the Force itself settling into a slow, steady tide. In that calm, the details of this long, dark history can begin to fade. Names, ranks, dates, the exact order of conflicts, all of it can sink back into the background like distant thunder. Far beyond the horizon, the Sith become not a list of lords, but a soft echo of ambition and fear. A reminder that every rise already contains its fall, and every empire eventually becomes another layer of ruins beneath the next. Let the ancient exiles, the red-skied tombs, the emperors and fallen Jedi, the secret apprentices and the final storms over Exegol drift further away until they are only a quiet backdrop for dreams. The holocron of this tale closes, its facets dimming its glow. The story remains waiting in the dark, whenever wandering through galactic shadows is desired again. But for now, the Sith can rest, and so can the listener.